Well, happy Sunday in June, everybody, and welcome to our June YouTube chat. We are a week later this time than we usually are, but we warned you about that, and hopefully enough of you caught on to that you're joining us. So, welcome to everybody. As people are beginning to come in now, I'm just going to give you the usual spiel that I give, and that is that the way we open the discussion on these chats is to limit those that can ask questions to the members. And the reason we do that is because when we open it for everybody, the questions come in too fast, and they move too fast on the screen. It's hard to catch all the questions, and so the members can ask questions. Everybody else can listen, and also if you're not a member, well, join. That would be the best way to do it, and you can do that by hitting at the bottom of your screen there. You should see the word join. Just click on that, and you can join for $4.99 a month, and you get to ask questions during the YouTube chats, which are once a month. Plus, you get a free video lesson every month from our lessons website. Then also you get an extra little tip, composing tip, every second Sunday, I guess it is.
Yes.
It? Yeah, every second Sunday we get the composing tip. So every first Sunday you get your coupon for your free video, and then every second Sunday you get a snippet. Yep. Another little tip for you. And then usually it's third Sunday that we have these chats, but occasionally scheduling problems will cause us to have those on fourth Sunday. At any rate, that's how we do it. So the other thing I wanted to point out to you is that we have other ways that you can study with us. Of course, you know about the quick tips, but the other ways that you can study with us, in addition to watching the live chat and getting some kind of in-depth discussion on topics, we do have the website, DianneMize.com, where you can get free lesson downloads. We have 170 lessons there. They're grouped into series, 4 lessons per topic. I think it's with one exception of that, where there are 2 lessons per topic. And not only that, but we have the Academy now, where we are teaching full courses. And these are self-paced courses. You can go to the Academy. It's Dianne Mize Academy. 2 different websites now, DianneMizeAcademy.com. And there you can study the courses. You can sign up for courses, and you can study them at your own pace. You don't have to work on my schedule or on anybody else's schedule. You can work on your own schedule. And that's becoming a very popular way for people to study and to go in depth on topics. All kinds of several courses there on different aspects of working with color, and then working with various aspects of composition. They are all in some way connected to how you compose your paintings. So those are the opportunities we have available. We are offering now. We're trying to get a new course up on the Academy website every month, and right now we have a special deal going. If you want, you can get the new course that we offer for June at half price. You might check that out at DianneMizeAcademy.com if you haven't already. Every now and then you might just go browse and just kind of see what's going on there. I mean, we might be up to something you've never heard of before. And if you're not signed up for our newsletter, let me encourage you to do that. You can sign up for the newsletter either from the Academy website or from the Lessons website. I think it says stay in touch with Dianne or something like that. And that way you'll be on the mailing list, and that way every Saturday morning you get what I call my Saturday morning thoughts. These are little short focused comments or in-depth studies, and sometimes exercises. Anything are all related to painting and different points of view of painting, that sort of thing. So there are all kinds of ways that you can learn painting if you hang around with us, and we enjoy that. Okay, so we're here beginning to get some response from our
Member,
huh?
members.
Members. So Eve, Carolyn, Lisa, hello from California, North Carolina, and Arizona. And Eve says it's 116 degrees there. Oh my Lord. Stay cool, Eve. I hope you have air conditioning. All right, I tell you what, let's do now. Here's the way this works. The chats, you know, if you're used to coming to our chats, the way it works, I usually have made a short video for you to explain to you what the chat's going, the concept that we're working with. This chat is going to focus on my value line that I always set up on my palette, and I just find it a magnificent way of setting up a limited palette to get the maximum number, maximum possibilities with color. So I think this time it's about a 15-minute video. I had trouble getting it all into a shorter one. So you watch the video. Now, I usually say hold off on your questions until after the video, but it's okay if you hear me say something during the video and you want to ask a question about it, just go ahead and type it in the chat, and Roger will catch it after the video, or we'll try to. I'm going to try that to see if that causes problems. We'll go back to the wait till after the video to ask questions. Okay, as everybody else, pardon me, this is going to be Froggy Day. I can tell it already. But if Roger, you're ready, I think folks are beginning to gather in now. Let's go ahead and start the video, and then you can start asking your questions, and we'll get that discussion going. Okay?
Here we go.
Our roller, Roger. A value line palette is a palette of pre-mixed colors where the artist has mixed the full value range of each color that is going to be used in a painting. Sometimes each value is mixed separately and has its own separate little location, as we see here. At other times, a value line might be a gradation of each color that goes from the darkest dark to the lightest light of each color that's going to be used. When setting the value line, we normally start with the darkest dark of each color, and then we set up intervals of that color that move horizontally from the darkest dark to the lightest light. When we start the next color, we align the values of the next color with the values of the line already created. And we continue that process until we have placed on the palette all the mixtures that we're going to need for a particular painting. We determine what colors we're going to create in that value line according to what we want to do with the painting. So when we want to just respond to the colors we're seeing, we start first with the first color that we see most of. Now when I'm looking at this reference, I see a lot of yellow-green. I see some blue-green in those darker areas. I'm going to point to the color wheel as I'm talking about this because that's how we decide which colors are going to go on the palette. But I see lots of yellow-green in this range right here. I don't see it as saturated though. I see that yellow-green as being, maybe the lighter ones are sort of leaning towards the kind of saturation I see right here on this wheel. But that's really not a full saturated yellow-green. So I need a yellow-green that is, I can start out with a yellow-green that's slightly desaturated to the point that I see the highest saturation in my reference. See how easy that can be. But then I will not look at the other colors, and make decisions about them until I set up the potential for everything that can control that green. I need the potential to go dark to light. I need the ability to get less saturated, maybe even more saturated. I need the ability to get it warmer in areas and cooler in areas. So I will start out with that color on the palette. Now, my preference for a yellow-green, especially when doing a scene from nature, my preference is to start out with sap green. I mix my own sap green, as those of you who are accustomed to studying with me know. I mix my own, but you can. Daniel Smith makes a wonderful sap green. I don't know if they're going to make it in oils anymore, but that's another subject for discussion. I make my own. You see how very dark that is. It's also very transparent. So I start out with the darkest dark sap green. Now that gives me the potential for dark yellow green right here. I need the potential now to carry that from the darkest dark to the lightest light. So I'm going to create my value line. That's the purpose of my value line on my palette. It's my way of working. Other artists might adjust the value as they go. I like to have the potential already set up on the palette. So the yellow green. Now we will need the lightest light right here. We need the middle value right here. We have the choice of creating a gradated value line that looks just like a gradation that goes from the darkest dark to the lightest light. Or we can do another kind of value line where I have piles of value, not a continuation. Now normally the wisest thing to do is to set up the light value next, but I look at that and I'm seeing that yellow-green really gets a little bit more yellow, or the yellow gets more emphasized as it gets lighter. And so I want that yellow-green to have more, the sap green, I want it to have a little more yellow in it. Now I call this a value color line. And so what I'll do then is in this middle value area, right here, I will lighten that to middle value 5, or that middle value. Then I can take from this and build the lightest light. So I will do that. And so I'm reaching for Hansa yellow light. Cadmium yellow light would do that. Any yellow that sits pretty close to spectrum yellow can lean a little bit towards yellow orange. But so I'm going to now add this into this pile and keep adding until I get that middle value with the Hansa yellow light. In this case, I just want to call it yellow because I'm working with hues, and I'm just going to stick to the hue name. So I just keep adding. I see that really is very, very not dark, not light enough. So keep pulling it in here. Give me that potential. Keep adding that yellow until I get that middle value. That's what I'm looking for. Now, sometimes people ask, well, how do you know whether you want to use a color to raise the value when you're building a value line, or whether you want to just use white? There depends on what you're doing. Depends on what your needs are. Depends on what's in the color you're looking at in the reference. If the color in the reference from the darkest value of that color to the lightest value of that color. When I say color, I'm talking specifically yellow, green, green, blue, green. I'm talking specifically. I'm not talking about just a general area of green. So in yellow green, for example, if you see that the darker versions are really taking on more yellow as they come more and more into the light, then creating the lighter value lines up to middle value with the yellow will answer that, will take care of that. Now I'm going to get just a little bit more because I want to get it a little bit closer. It's a little tiny bit darker there, so get it just a little bit closer to that middle value range, and also closer to the yellow green I'm seeing in that scene. So that will take care. Now let's see, as I squint with that, I'm going to have to move my head a little bit sideways and squint at it to be sure. Yeah, that is very close. Very, 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 very close to middle value, and I think it's close enough. Now, dark, middle, light, and so I'm going to put my lightest light over here, but now I'm using white because I don't need it to be any more yellow. I don't see that green going more yellow, more towards yellow green, or towards the moving more in the yellow direction as it would on the wheel. So I'm going to just use what I have in the middle value there to create the lightest light. Now, the lightest light I like to make about a half tone 1. The light of the light at that point where you can begin to see hue in it. Now, I will in between these create a value that is halfway between those two. And once again, I'll use the yellow green that I mixed here. And so I want this value to sit in the value range, to sit halfway between. So I just keep adding from there. And so it's a good idea if you're mixing a value color line like that, where adding yellow is works better. It's going to work better for the painting than adding white. Then it's better to mix enough of it so that you can create this in between value right here. Now what I'm trying to do is get a visual interval that is the same in value between this and this and that and that. You see, still, this is, if you squint, that you see this is still a little close to that, a little bit more difference in values between this and that. So I'm going to add just a little bit more to it. So, and by being a little bit more careful like that in setting up a value line, it just helps when you get to the painting, helps you to stay more in the value range. And I sometimes I take more pains in being sure that I get that, being sure I get those more or less equal intervals. This is still a little bit close to that. Still a little bit close to it, but I think it's probably enough. I think there's probably enough difference there for this to work, because all those are going to get all mixed up anyway. Just want a sequence: dark, middle, light, dark, in between the dark and middle, in between the middle and light and the light, so, which is one way to say it. Now, what I'll do here, I don't want to use that again because I don't want to run out of that, but I don't have to because I only used yellow. And so I'll just go back to the yellow here to create this value, which I kind of think of this as a moderate shadow value, a value that we will usually find in moderate shadow areas. This kind of right here on, or a mixture with that, is very close to what we might call shallow value. Now, in a line set up the way I set mine up, as far as how these work in the painting, I always think of from middle value on to the darkest dark. That's going to be where I'll be working when I'm working shadow areas, somewhere right in there. And the middle value is over the lightest light when I'm working areas that are in light. So middle value is a transition, and it can belong, as far as how we interpret the use on the value line, it can belong to both sides. If you squint, you can see those a lot better. If you have a problem with squinting, let me know. I can teach you that. It's really the key to squinting. If you have problems with this, close one eye and then pull your eyelid about halfway down on the other one. Now this will work. Now we've got a value line that is sequentially moving from the darkest dark to the lightest light. This dark is also transparent. It begins to get more opaque as it moves towards the white area there. So now I need a color to desaturate that yellow green where I need it desaturated. Go back to the color wheel and I see that the complement of yellow green is red violet. So we'll choose red violet and I'll develop a second value line with the red violet. My red violet is quinacridone violet. The third ability I need is the ability to warm the yellow green further if I need to. I already have that on the palette in the yellow, so won't need to develop a value line there. And that's because the only place I see the yellow-green being warmer towards yellow are in the areas in light, so I don't need the value line for that. The next potential I need for controlling yellow-green is the ability to cool it. And in the cooling it, I'm going to be changing it to the blue-greens that I see there. And the best way to do that would be to choose ultramarine blue. The ultramarine blue is closer to the blue that we see on the color wheel. If I were to choose something like phthalo blue, that would add more yellow back into it. So I'll put a value line of blue on the palette. And now we have the ability to desaturate the yellow-green, we have the ability to warm the yellow-green, and the ability to cool it. So at this point, let's look for other colors in the reference to see, do we already have on the palette the ability to make any of the other colors we see in addition to the yellow-green. The miraculous part about creating a value line using this method is that 9 times out of 10, once you get the original color you see, and then you get the ability to saturate, ability to warm and cool, you'll be surprised that already you have all the colors you need. There'll be times when you'll have to add a second color or another color, but you will be surprised at how well that works. Now look at what we have here. We have red, yellow oranges, oranges to yellow oranges. These are desaturated here. We can mix the quinacridone violet, the red violet, into the yellow they already have, and we can get that yellow orange. We have these neutrals here. We already have the ability to get neutrals with the yellow, green, and red violet. If we need the neutral cooler, we have the ultramarine blue. If we need the neutral warmer, we have the yellow. So we have that ability. So it seems that we have all the colors here on the palette that we'll need in order to create all the colors that we see here. Now it's time for you to ask your questions. All right. I guess I jumped the gun a bit too soon there. Anyway, we're back now, so I'm ready to take your questions. And while I'm waiting for your questions, hopefully you're going to have some. Or while I'm waiting for your questions, I want to just point out something to you that I think is very, very interesting. Notice I said there towards the end that 9 times out of 10, when you set up the value line using this method that I'm using of first of all, locate one color, and I usually say the color that you see most of in a scene, and then once you set the value line for that, the next color is its complement, and then the next color is the ability to warm it, and the next color is the ability to cool it. Now what I have discovered is it's absolutely amazing. Now when you use that system of setting up your palette, you've got a limited palette there, and most likely you're going to find within the colors you've already got on the palette the ability to mix other colors you see in the scene, especially if you're doing a landscape scene. You're going to find that. So that's one thing. I think if even if you were to not particularly enjoy setting up a full value line like I did here on the palette, just to use that system for selecting the colors that you're going to use would be a really good way to come up with a palette of 3 or 4. Usually it's going to be 4, sometimes it'll be just 3 tube colors that can give you every color that you're going to need while you're doing a painting. It's really a magnificent thing. Think about this. Think about if you have one hue. Think about, I said you need ways of controlling everything that hue can do, or everything that we can do with that hue, or everything it can do, however we want to say that. Think about it. This is really, it's really amazing when you think that every single hue can be taken to the darkest dark, the lightest light. That is the value range. And that value range is caused by light. It's caused mostly, the value range, not the hue range, the value range is caused mostly by what the light is doing, how strong the light is hitting in an area, or what's going on within the shadows of an area, or what colors might be reflecting back into an area. All different considerations that we observe when we're painting. Just the value line. And then think about this. Now we have those three capabilities in color, in every hue, or in every color. The hue of that color, the value of that color, the saturation of that color. Some consider transparency, but transparency is what happens in the painting. So I don't consider transparency as a major part of the color itself. It's a result of the kind of paint we're using and what we're doing with it. But if you're using this method, you're actually creating all those possibilities, all the things that can happen within a color, all the values, a range of values that happen in the color, and all the actually the tilts of the color. Like we know that every color can either become warmer or cooler according to where it's located on the color wheel. Yellow, for example, on the color wheel, yellow can become a little more orange, or it can become a little bit more green, and still we perceive it as yellow. So that's the hue changes that we can get. And then, of course, the saturation changes, and that is when we use a complement to pull a hue out, giving us more neutralized hue, more neutralized color. And most of the colors we see in nature are, to some degree or another, neutralized. We see that Roger just popped up my intensity wheel there. I've tried to give you a diagram of 6 degrees of neutrality that every color can have when its complements added to it. And those are the kinds of things we see in nature. And then, of course, the warm and the cool. And warm and the cool is about hue as well. You know, if a color gets any hue that's sitting on the color wheel, any hue we can think of, if it's leaning more towards blue, if the hue changes more towards blue, it's getting cooler. If it changes more in the other direction towards the warm colors, it gets warmer. So Lisa says, why and when would you use the gradated palette instead of the value line version? That's kind of I don't really have an absolute answer for that, Lisa. Sometimes a scene within itself has a lot of gradation already. Say the fall scene in the fall, we will often see colors in the trees in the fall gradating, like from yellows to oranges to reds and things like that. And so I might choose to just set a gradated palette for those. Usually it depends upon the scene, what's in the scene. It depends, let me say this differently, upon the subject, not just the scene, the subject. And then also, a lot of times it just depends on the mood, your mood. What do you feel needs to happen? Do you feel you need to set up that in a gradation, or do you feel a sense of needing those colors to be more individualized? The important thing is that you align the values of each line with each other, but it really, and it's just a matter of preference. And sometimes it's artistic preferences, sometimes it's just a preference according to how you feel you work best for a particular scene. So that's pretty much it. And let's see. Oh, we have, is that Atelier? Am I pronouncing your name right? Hello from Switzerland. Okay, Lisa, sure thing. The thing that a lot of people, I want to also point out something here that that you might run into if you've never worked with a value line palette before, and you want to give it a try. Remember that where the values are located on the value line is determined by value as it comes out of the tube. So if a color is very, very dark, as we see behind me here, this is the Rembrandt transparent oxide red. It comes out of the tube very, very dark. It belongs way over there on the darkest side. But for example, this color right up here on my palette, if that were one of the colors I'd be using when it first comes out of the tube, you see it would belong about right here. So because it is a very light, it's in the light range. It's not the lightest light, but it's in the light range, and so it would belong about right here in the gradated palette, and perhaps we're also about right there in the individualized, or however I say that, palette. But then say cadmium red light, there it is right up here. It's a little bit darker in value than cadmium yellow deep is here. And so it would belong about right in here on the palette as I was setting up. So what I would need to do then for both those, for cadmium red deep, for cadmium red light, I would need then to work backwards towards the darkest dark. And for that, it's using the darkest red. Usually alizarin does a really, really good job doing that, mixing the alizarin into the cadmium red light to move backwards towards the darkest dark. For alizarin coming out of the tube would belong about right here, and then the cadmium red light and alizarin be mixed together for the middle section, and then for the middle section, cadmium red light itself. And then, now here's one thing too, a little bit of a caution. If you mix white with cadmium red light, it's going to turn it more pink. It subtracts out some of the yellow that's within cadmium red light. So you might find that as you're building a color like that towards the light side, that it'd be a good idea to use the yellow and white. And you probably have to find the proportion of yellow to cadmium red light, or yellow and white to cadmium red light, to do that. But we can't make rules about these things. We have to do it by vision. So I just wanted to give you a few little pointers of, it's easy enough to start with colors that come dark, come out of the tube really dark like these. Then all we have to do is build that line lighter as we move from dark to light. But if one of your local colors happens to be in the lighter areas, such as we see up here, yellow for example, or even this is yellow ochre light, whatever, your tube colors are probably going to be different from mine, but it's just a general purpose. Then you build backwards using a tube color that is most closely related. And if you don't have a tube color, then you may need to build backwards with, I would say it's not a bad idea to have a tube color that you could depend on for that. For example, for the if the local color were yellow like this, I would want to build backwards, and I would go to the transparent oxide red, which has orange in it. But then I would add a little violet into that to knock down the red part of it. And that would end up giving me the darkest dark I need there. And if I could keep but then see what happens if you start adding dark violet to that yellow, it is going to change in value as it goes about right here. And about right here, it's going to look like yellow ochre. So there's another option, is if you have something where the local color is yellow, if that yellow is leaning more towards yellow orange, then if you have yellow ochre, that's another option. So always look at what the hue is of your tube colors to find out, or to make that decision. Now, yellow is one of those that when it starts going darker in shadow, you're going to see it lose some of its yellow hue. and all colors all hues will do that to a degree, but the ones that we are accustomed to seeing lighter as they come out of the tube are going to be more noticeable in that direction. So if you need more help on that, you can ask a question, and I probably could go into that more deeply, but it's not always starting necessarily from the darkest dark and moving to the lightest light. If your local color, if you see most of, is one of those that you're going to start out with light in the tube. So let me know if that's clear, or if it's not clear, then we can clear it up. Another thing that I mentioned, let's see, okay, good, Lisa, I'll talk about what I was going to say in a minute if I remember to. Is there an acrylic version of transparent oxide red that you know of? I don't know the answer to that. There might, some of the companies might actually have a transparent oxide red, but a burnt sienna, although a burnt sienna is very, very close to transparent oxide red. The difference is that, and burnt sienna within itself can be different in values and in transparency from company to company. Some companies might have a burnt sienna that is darker in value than some of the other burnt siennas, which might be about like right here in value. So that would be something you would need to go to the color charts of the company, of the acrylic companies. Go to the color charts and check that out. Now, I really am not as familiar with all of the available company brands of acrylic as I am with the brands of oil and watercolor. So I don't really know the answer to that, but I think if you check out the charts, especially if you have a local art supply store, or if you are in one at any time, you can check. They usually have color charts there that show a reasonable or relatively close representation of how dark and how transparent, well, how dark a color is, and then usually we'll have it listed as to how transparent it is. Sorry, I can't be more help on that one. You know, sometimes I neglect to remember when I'm talking about stuff like this, especially, that not all mediums have the same color names available, and so you go to the source that you know that information is available, and usually the art supply stores or those color charts we see online when we're on an art supply store, we usually gives a pretty good idea of what we're dealing with. And okay, so do you mean to tell me that my explanation on the video was so clear that nobody has any more questions than that? Now, the other thing I was going to talk about, the squinting. The importance of squinting when you're setting up your value lines. And as I said there, that if you needed help learning how to squint, a lot of people don't even know how to squint, but the importance of squinting is this. It blurs things down to the point that it gives you a better comparison, especially of values. So when you're setting up your value lines, if you squint, you will be better able to see the comparison of the dark to middle to the light, and especially when you're working in those in between middle and light and in between dark and light, you'll be able to better see your comparison. Now, if you don't know how to squint, it's really, really easy. I think I pointed out in the video. Close one eye and just pull the other eyelid about halfway down, just kind of like you see me doing right here, and everything's just kind of gets real fuzzy looking, and then you can look at the screen there and you can see how you can see the differences in those values right up here. You can see those differences in those values a lot easier when you squint. Okay, hello Diane, do you have a tip for mixing a red without any touch of orange, orange yellow, or do you recommend a true tube color? Claudia. Claudia. Okay. Well now, do I have a tip for mixing red without any touch of orange or yellow? Which kind of red are we talking about? Are we talking about red on the red on spectrum red, or are you talking about a red that leans in another direction? Because honestly, we cannot mix the primary colors in their purest form. We have to find the tube colors for the primary colors in their purest form. And yellow and red and blue are all three primary colors. So I don't have, my recommendation for true red, what I think of as primary red, well, the color I use, I'll tell you what I use there, and then I'll tell you of another option. Now, some of the companies will have what they call spectrum red, and those are advertised to be true red. I found that if I use the cadmium red light, which is right here on my palette, and if I use a cadmium red light is really more of a tertiary that leans more toward, a little bit more towards red orange. It's about right in here. But then the alizarin crimson, which is right here, located right here on both my oil palette and my watercolor palette. Alizarin crimson is very, very dark, but it slightly leans a little bit more towards violet, just a little bit. A little bit of alizarin crimson added into that cadmium red light gives me as close to the true red as I'm going to need, because it won't take much. And so that's my choice for reds. But if I need something that's really, really closer to a spectrum red, which is rare, like if I'm working with the flowers or something that really is calling for that to be a spectrum red, then I'll go to one of the quinacridone reds. Something like a combination of the quinacridone reds. They have several of them, but they have options there for being more on spot. Now, the quinacridones tend to be, for the most part, not always, but for the most part, more transparent. So you get that combination too. And so, or do you recommend true tube colors? I don't have always on my palette for any of the colors. I don't necessarily have a true tube color. Only for the primaries, yes. Mostly for the primaries. But what I've found is that I like it doesn't matter. There's several of the yellows that are pretty close to spectrum yellow. There's the cadmium yellow light, and there's the Hansa yellow light. Hansa yellow light, though, it's kind of confusing because the Utrecht is the only one I know of that makes Hansa yellow light that is sitting right there where it's sitting on the spectrum. Gamblin makes one called Hansa yellow light, but it's much lighter and leans a little bit more towards a little cooler than this one. But this is my preference for many reasons. And as I said before, that's as close to the spectrum red as I have on my palette. And there's a color that Winsor Newton makes called Winsor Scarlet, which is very close to this, but maybe leans just a little bit more towards spectrum red. But you're going to find what's important is how you use colors with each other to create, because very rarely very rarely in nature, unless you're doing abstract painting where you're working specifically with primary and secondary mixtures, a spectrum, whatever. If you're working like from nature or any subject I can think of, very rarely are you going to need something that's right spectrum, right point on the spectrum. So you can lean those one way or the other. Now you come, okay, yeah. All right, did I ramble around that one enough, Claudia, to answer your question? Let's see. I see mixture of red without a touch of yellow orange. I see. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What's important is that whatever palette colors you come up with as your favorite palette colors, is that they have the ability that within the mixtures of those various selections that you would make for your palette colors, that they have the ability to give you all the options that you're going to need in your painting. And when you find that there's a gap in an option, then we go looking for another tube color. But most of us painters end up like with hundreds of tubes of paint because we're so drawn to color. And some people like having all those variations in whatever of color. And it's individual choice. What works best for me may not work best for you, or may not work best for everybody else. But what I hope to do, is to share with you what I have discovered, or what I am still discovering about the way color behaves with color, how color affects color, and perhaps that can give you some ways to think through how you work through your color. So if you prefer having like 24, 36 or whatever colors on your palette, go for it. I'm too lazy for that. I prefer having the fewest number of colors possible and being able to get the most out of them. And what's amazing is how many ways, how many roads there are to Rome, how many different combinations can give you the same or similar results. So I don't know how I got started off. Oh yes, I do remember. It was Claudia's question. Okay, are there any other questions? Does the value line interest you at all? Or I know that there are a number of you who have already mastered the value line, or already have been working with value line for some time. Oh yes, I know. There's one other thing I kept thinking. I must tell you this. The term value line is you might hear also called value strings. Now, I know in James Gurney's book, Light and Color, he uses the term value string. And so it doesn't matter. It means the same thing. It's just the difference between the word line and the word string. To me, line is more, it fits better into my method of thinking. And it doesn't make any difference what you call it. Well, as long as it suggests what it is, it doesn't make any difference. Just wanted to clear that up. They are the same thing. A value string and a value line are the same thing. Different people have different ways of setting up those premixes. You'll find, like Richard Schmid, when he painted, for example, he was so familiar with color that he simply just reached his brush where he wanted it to go and formed his values and in different values and hues and saturations as he created them. And that worked perfectly fine for him. It's not that I'm saying everybody has to have a value line. I just find that for me, having those values there represents more in my method of thinking, or my method of perceiving, I should say it that way. It relates better in my method of thinking and perceiving with to work this way works better. What I mean by that is, I like seeing things in terms of light and shadow, as you well know, or you should know by now if you've watched enough of my stuff. And the reason I do is because in my years of painting, I've discovered how important it is to pay attention to what the light source is doing to color. And that is not only the light source is causing what we see in the light areas, but it's also causing what we see in the shadow areas. And so in my method of thinking, as I pointed out to you in the video, in my method of thinking, I have that value line set up according to that method of thinking, that wherever the light rays are hitting, I'm going to find those mixtures right in here. And then everything we look at will have a transition area. In other words, even when you're observing light and shadow, whether it's light and shadow created by direct light or indirect light, we always will have that little transition area where an area in light is no longer in light, it's now going into shadow. And that transition area is always found right here in that middle value range. So that's why I refer to that middle value range as the transition area. So the way the value line sets itself up, whatever is to this side of that transition are the mixtures I'm going to have when I'm working in any kind of shadow, most likely. The transitions I set up from here to here are going to have whatever I need that is not in shadow, where the light rays are hitting. Now the exceptions to that is if I intentionally change the key of a painting. If I intentionally, for example, change the key of the painting to a low-key painting or a high-key painting, like Monet did, for example, in his many studies of, if you remember the Rouen Cathedral studies, how Monet had a number of interpretations of those, and some of those were high-key interpretations, meaning that he would see shadow areas as within a range, within a narrow value range. So he'd be setting up a gamut of a narrow value range. And so whatever is in this area then is being interpreted as in shadow, and what's in this area be interpreted as not in shadow. Or sometimes impressionists will use color, like they'll use cool colors to interpret light and warm colors cool colors to interpret shadow and warm colors to interpret light. Now, when I'm talking about the value line in this sense, in the sense I am presenting it to you today, I'm talking about that straightforward interpretation of what your eyes are seeing in any situation, whether you're in plein air painting, whether you're doing a portrait, whether you're working with still life, whatever condition, or even when you're working from photographs, is that straightforward intention to work with the colors you see. Now, when you get into using more interpretive and more expressive uses of color, you set different perimeters for yourself. And so I just wanted to clear that up. This is straightforward responding to the colors that you see, the colors that are in front of you, where your intention is to interpret those colors. And that in that sense, when you're working in that way, you're working pretty directly. Then the value line method for setting up a limited palette to get all the variations of the color that you're going to need is really quite surprisingly wonderful. All right, we're getting towards the wrap-up time. Is there any other question? Anybody else have any other question that you want to ask? If you do, you better pop it up now, because we're going to sign off in just a few minutes. Before we sign off, though, I do want to remind you this will be the third Sunday in July, as far as we know.
Yeah, should be.
Okay, we'll be back on regular schedule in July. So if you are subscribed, if you're a subscriber, be sure that you have clicked on the bell at the top of the screen there to get the notifications that we send out, so that you can always be informed, so that you will receive an email telling you that whatever we're sending all the subscribers as communication, you receive an email. So be sure, but you won't receive that email just by subscribing. At least as far as I know, you really YouTube requires that you click on the notification and check that you want to receive notifications, because so that's going to be anyway. That will then you always know whether we're going to be on the third Sunday or fourth Sunday, because we always send those messages out to you. Okay, Lisa says, new to this method, but love using the value line. However, my palette gets messy rather quickly, especially when adjusting saturation. Should I get better with this practice? My palette gets messy too, Lisa. It's something that happens. Every now and then we have to kind of take a pause, and we have to clear up areas of the palette and reset those value lines. And I think that is true with all painters. The palette's going to get messy when you start really mixing color. You're mixing up and down and back and forth, especially when you're mixing saturations and so forth. It's going to get messy. But no, I just think that don't worry too much about it. If it's getting so messy so quick that you lose your value line early. I mean, after you've just started, maybe kind of pull back or reassess what you're doing. It's causing that to happen. But I wouldn't worry too much about that, because we all do it. You should see my palette sometimes. When I get towards the end of the painting, I can't even find the value line anymore. Value line serves us most strongly in the beginning stages of the painting anyway, especially in those beginning block-in stages when we're first getting the stage set for what's going to happen or how the whole thing is going to pull together. That's when the value line serves us best. And once we get really deep in the painting, really begin to do refinement, you will already have the light and shadow areas established, and at that point you're going to be searching for emphasis in different ways to emphasize, different ways to change, make changes, or that sort of thing. So it doesn't matter so much towards the end of the painting as it does at the beginning of the painting anyway. Okay, folks. We're going to call this to a stop now, and I hope that if the value line is new to you, the whole idea of the value line is new to you, just give it one try, one time, and go through my little steps there. This is just, it's not rules. It's a method we use for saying, here's what I need to do first, and then if I want to get the most out of this, once I get the first color, a value line for the first color, if I want to get the most out of it, then I'm going to need a way to desaturate it, or and it might need a way to create more saturation. The saturation point is more or less. A lot of times I'm saying desaturate, but saturation works in both directions, and of course in the warming and cooling. So give that a try and see what happens, and then leave notes for me in the comments section under any of the YouTube, any of the quick tips you watch. You can leave a comment there and let me know how the value line is working for you. Okay, thank you all for joining us, and I will look forward to seeing you again in, pardon me a minute.
Once YouTube is done rendering, they can click on the live tab and review this if they need be.
Pardon me. Bye. Good. That happened.